All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Comp 2452. I hope that you're having a great, cold, frigid January morning. As I promised, and it was actually kind of dicey. I wasn't sure if we were going to get enough cookies over the weekend, but we've got 1.5 quadrillion cookies there. And so we're going to be able to buy the Bingo Center, the research facility. And this is what starts us along the path toward the Gramapocalypse. This is where Gramas start to turn evil. And the artwork for the Gramas starts to get like really kind of terrifying looking in terms of what a grandmother might look like. So I promised this for you. The next path along the research facility stuff for the Gramapocalypse, I'm promising to the other sections. So you'll have to just accept that you get this one, and then we'll have to skip the next one. But we're going to start this. Nothing's really going to happen yet, but as we proceed, things are going to start to happen. I forget which things you've seen, but we also have this garden now that we're able to plant some seeds. And this mini game is basically like, you start to plant seeds in the different kinds of soil, and it'll affect the number of cookies per second that you're getting, but you're also trying to plant the seeds strategically so that they mutate with each other to get you more kinds of seeds. And then I'm pretty sure that we saw the stock market already, and then there's the grimoire. So we'll conjure some baked goods, and we'll just get some free cookies, and we'll do a couple upgrades and buy some buildings here. We've got antimatter condensers. We've got all sorts of cool things. I did quickly look at my my YouTube channel the other day, and I've noticed that now all of them just have like cookie clicker at the beginning of them, which is fine with me. It's totally fine with me. Let's actually talk about course material. So, like I said, I hope you had a good weekend. At the end of last week, the place where we were at was we started to think about testing again. In Comp 2450, we spent time thinking about testing from the perspective of how do I do things like make appropriate test data for the things that I'm trying to test? How do I set up a test? How do I write hard-coded sets of statements so that I can get the thing that I'm testing into a certain state so that I can run that behavior and verify that that thing is doing what I said it was supposed to do? In Comp 2450, I wrote a test harness for you, and I said, here you go. This is painful to write. I don't want all of you to have to write this over and over again. You're very welcome to just use the test harness that I've got. In this course, I still don't want you to write a test harness because it's painful and tedious, but it's something that is useful to have. It's important to have something that will run all of your tests. And so the place that we ended last time was thinking about testing frameworks in this course. We made the distinction between libraries and frameworks. So we were thinking about like a library is giving us the ability to call functionality. I want to incorporate this functionality into my existing code, where a framework is really about, I want to use somebody else's software to do this, and they're going to call my code. So I have to write my code in a certain structure so that it actually gets called by this testing framework. Today, what I want to do is wrap that up. So I want to run the tests with you. I'm hoping that you took a chance to run them over the weekend after I pushed this up to GitLab after class on Thursday last week. But I want to run it together with you so that you can see what we're doing, and you can kind of see the outputs that are produced by this testing tool. And then I want to set up testing with coverage. So this is something that's straightforward. It's documented pretty well on the VTest documentation website. But I just want to show you the purpose of this, like holding your hand to get the coverage stuff set up, is I'm not really testing you or assessing your ability to set up coverage. I want to assess the coverage of your testing. So I want to make sure that we're all able to get that set up together. And then the last thing that I want to do today is to spend some time wrapping up this MVC implementation. So last week, we left with a to-do of, I want to take this button out of index.html and I want to move that into a view. But I also want to do a couple of other things. I want to have a view that is set up that does things like popping up, so appearing when certain events are happening. Our controller is going to be responsible for deciding when to show a view and when to hide a view, or when it should be removed from the setup. And I also want this view to have some responsibility to actually take input. So to do something with a field on the page. And as a result of doing something with a field on the page, I wanted to handle errors. So going back to Comp 2450, We want to be able to raise exceptions when there's an issue with the input that we're getting. I want to be able to handle that. So how can I make it so that my view actually shows this error to the person that's sitting in front of the machine? So by the end of today's lecture, continuing, I want you to do the same things that we were doing last week. We're continuing to work on this today. So be able to apply a simple software architecture to an application and to use a testing framework to automate running test suites. So what we'll start with today is I want to review the tests that we wrote, just to remind ourselves of the structure of what it is that we're doing. Then we will run those tests. Then we will add the coverage configuration and run the tests with coverage to see how the report looks when we do that. So I'm going to pop over here to my terminal. I did push some changes up after class last week. So if you're following along on your own machine, please make sure to do a git pull before we start today. I'm going to go down here to tests, and the place where we were writing these tests was in this trainer.test.ts. First things first, the name of this file is important. The structure of the name of this file is important. We're using a testing framework. VTest is our testing framework. The testing framework is expecting to find tests by finding files that have a name that includes the symbols .test. So the file name that we're looking for here, or that we want to name our tests, must be of this pattern. This is a testing framework. It's calling our code. It has to know how to find our code in the first place to be able to call it. So for it to be able to find our tests, they must be named .test somewhere in the file name to indicate to VTest that this file contains tests. Within this, we've got a couple of different tests. So the first one here is on line 6, and the next one here is on line 15. This is a function that we're calling from VTest that's called test. It takes 2 arguments. The first argument is a plain English description of what the test is. So really quick summary of this is the functionality that I'm trying to verify with the test that I'm about to write. The second argument that it takes is this is the test itself. This is the function that I want you to actually run to do the test. So it takes, at least for us for now, it takes no arguments. And the content of this test is going to be, I'm going to do that hard-coded setup. I'm going to call the thing that I'm trying to evaluate the behavior of. And then what I'm going to do at the end is make observations about the side effects of what I've done. I want to make sure that the behavior that I'm testing has actually succeeded. It has actually done something. So on the lines before 12 here, what we're seeing is that hard-coded setup. I'm setting up these 2 instances of these domain model objects. I'm adding them together. I'm doing some operation on one of them. And then this expect function call here is going to be the beginning part of, I want to verify that the results actually happened. This is what I'm expecting to see as an output here. So expect t.team then .contains is a way for us to express this statement of, my expectation for a successful test here is that the team of this trainer contains the Pokemon after I've called t.add to team. The other test that we have here was about checking that listener pattern actually worked the way that we were expecting it to. So we do the hard-coded setup here. We're creating 2 instances of these classes, Pokemon and Trainer. In line number 21 here, where we do the register listener, this is the start of that listener pattern setup stuff that we've got. I want to register a listener so that it can be notified when changes have taken place in that domain model object. What we're passing to register listener here is just a bare JavaScript object. We're expecting things that satisfy the interface listener, and that interface listener says that something that is a listener has a method on it or a function that's called notify. This bare JavaScript object, this curly brace notation with the name of a method inside of it that's called notify, satisfies that interface. It doesn't have to explicitly implement it. It just satisfies that interface, so we can pass it here. What this is doing is, on line 19 here, I have this external variable that's called notify that's set to false. Here, I'm effectively saying that if I was notified, I'm going to set that value to true so that when I call add to team, I can then say I'm expecting that notified is now equal to true. So as long as I was notified, that function got called, that notify function got called, it will set that value to true, and my test, I would expect that to pass at this point. Are we all okay with that so far? Any questions? Okay. So I'm going to open up a new terminal to the bottom here, just so we can see this output kind of all at the same time. And what I'm running here is, this is the directory that contains my project. So this is the root directory of my project. So we've got source, tests, public, and so on. To run this test suite, I'm going to use npx. And the command that I want to give here is vtest. So vtest is going to be run the test suite. I want you to take, I want vtest to start up, find files that have that .test. Within those files, I want you to find all of the test functions, and I want you to run all of those things. I'm going to expand this so we can see it, and this will run the tests. And in fact, it will just now sit around and wait for me to add more tests so that it can keep being notified that there's more tests to run and more tests to invoke. So what it's showing us here is what our test harness was showing us, excuse me, in Comp 2450. It's showing us that I ran these tests, can add Pokemon to team, trainers notify listeners. It's telling us a little bit about how long they took to run. For me, for now, this is kind of irrelevant. This is going to be so small that it doesn't really make a difference to us, but it can be valuable information to you as you're working with more complex code. It keeps track of how many files had successes and how many tests were actually run. And it tells us things like how long it actually took to run that complete thing. I'm going to zoom out of this, and I'm going to make a small change here to my tests. I'm going to force this to fail. When a test is failing here with vtest, it tells us pretty explicitly a test has failed, and it uses nice colors like red to indicate that a test has failed. And it tells us where the test has failed. That is a huge advantage compared to the test harness that we cobbled together last term. It tells us important things like it failed, and it even points here. It says, hey, it failed right there. That's the failure that I saw. I expected it to be this value, and it wasn't that value. Big red markers. This has failed. Something needs to change about this. So I'm going to zoom out of here. I'm going to put this back to true. I'm going to save it. It will rerun those tests, and now we're all green. Everything's passing, and we're kind of in a good state here. I'm going to quit vtest here. I'm going to hit Q, or I'm going to hit Control-C on my keyboards. I'm going to pop back up here to my editor. And I'm going to pause one more time. Are there any questions about tests, and testing so far? So that's our next stop. We're going to do that right away. So let's do it. Let's do it. All right. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to actually start measuring coverage. We actually want to see how many lines of code have been covered by the tests that were run by this test suite. vtest can be configured to do test coverage. And so I'm going to open up the vtest webpage at vtest.dev. I'm going to go to guides here. And what I'm going to go to here is under guides, there is a page that's called coverage. This describes in detail what we need to do to get all of this stuff set up. I am going to set this up and run it for you so that you can see what this looks like. But I'm really just copy pasting things from this web page, kind of in the same way that I was with Maven last term. So I'm going to copy the contents of this file. I need to put it in this file that's called vtest.config.ts. So I'm going to go back to my terminal here. I'm going to add a new file, and I need to add that new file at the root of this. So it's vtest config.ts. I'm going to open that file. I'm going to paste what I've copied here. I don't really care about what this actually says. It's configuring VTest so that it will allow us to do coverage. So just to make sure we're all on the same page, what I've done is on the VTest webpage, there's this coverage guide under guides. So guides, coverage down here. I've copied this entire block from this. There are two different ways that we can measure coverage with VTest. I'm just using this default one. I don't know what the differences are between these two things. I don't really care. One of them works, that's fine for me. Once we've got that, then we can ask for coverage to happen by running a slightly different command. And I'm not sure if it's listed here, so I'm just going to run it. So I've saved this file. I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to go back down here to my other tab. Now what I'm going to say is npx vtest run, and I'm going to pass this option coverage to it. I'm going to press enter on my keyboard. It's going to ask me if I want to install this. Yes, I would like to install that. I will rerun it again. And I'm going to zoom in here. And what this is telling us now is that of the files that were executed or run as part of the tests, it's showing us the coverage. So this is the percent of statements that were run. These are the number of branches. Branch here is, are you all in Comp 2280? Have you done branch instructions yet? Okay, so we know about branches. Good. Branches are conditional statements. Branches are conditional statements. We're taking the branches of the conditional statement. So this is the percentage of branches. That's the percentage of functions and a percentage of lines that are covered. The one that I really care about here is this one, percentage of lines that are covered. And what we're measuring here is going to be the percentage of lines that are covered in the model folder that you've got. For testing, we are explicitly not testing our UIs right now. We may not test UIs at all in this course. We are explicitly not testing UIs. The controllers, for now, we're also not testing those. I don't care about the creation or removal of the views in the tests that we're writing. The thing that I really care about right now for testing is the model, the domain model. That is the thing that kind of encodes our logic. That's the thing that encodes the abstract ideas that we have in our system. The model is the thing that I really care about for coverage here. As with last term, coverage is not a good measurement overall of testing quality. It is a measurement of testing quality, and this is the measurement that we're going to use for assessing quality of tests. Are there any questions about testing? Because I'm gonna end it here. I'm probably not coming back to testing for the rest of the term, but I'll expect you to be doing it. Of course, I'll be happy to entertain questions about testing later, but for now, it's just the domain model objects that I care about you testing, yes. Keeping in mind, again, that our domain model objects ultimately have our logic stuff in them now. Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe not in a test structure. What are some other ways that people can test or metrics that they use to determine?
That's a great question. The question is ultimately, I'm telling you again that test coverage is not necessarily a good measurement. Test coverage is used everywhere to assess the quality of tests. It is a reasonable measurement of the quality of tests, especially when you have things like percentage of statements and percentage of branches that are actually being covered. If it was just lines or just functions, that value isn't as much as it could be with branches. Knowing that you've covered multiple branches of all the conditional statements that you have inside of a function is valuable to know about. Tests, for me, when I'm thinking about tests and when I'm kind of measuring the quality of my own tests internally, ultimately are, can I verify the behavior that my mom is expecting to be able to do? And that turns into things like, it's not just testing functionality in the Pokemon class or in the trainer class or in individual classes themselves. It's beginning to test things like, do all of these different classes actually work together to accomplish a goal? The kind of testing that we're doing in this course right now formally is what I would consider to be unit testing. We're building small tests to assess the behavior of different parts of our domain model, typically at the function level. I want to know what this function does. There are other kinds of testing. There are integration tests. These are going to be if I have an n-tier architecture, can I actually test from the logic layer to the persistence layer and back again and do all of those flows work? There are user acceptance tests and UI testing. I'm going to simulate somebody sitting in front of this web browser and actually click on buttons in the web browser. So like set up software and code that will not like pretend to click on a button and call your function, but literally click on the button in a web browser and then validate that a message appears on the screen. So it doesn't interrogate anything that's happening underneath. It just checks to see that this output is showing up on the screen as we're expecting it to do. Those to me are better quality tests than unit tests. I think that unit tests are important, and I think that coverage is a good way to measure it. But as we scale up with testing, and this is stuff that you'll do in Comp 3350, this is software engineering, that's where you'll start. That's where you will start to do these kinds of tests. Those tests become more important to me because they actually represent how my parents are going to use this system as opposed to testing in the micro of, does this function do what it says it's supposed to do? I hope that answers your question. It was kind of a long-winded ramble, but yeah. Any other questions? All right, awesome. Okay, so the status that we're at right now is that we have added we've added vtest to our package.json, and we've added this v8 dependency to package.json. So this got pulled in when we did that npx vtest the first time. It said we need this dependency to be able to do this, so it modified our package.json. And we've added this vtest config file. I'm going to add this stuff, so package lock and vtest config. I think that in coverage is a report of the coverage as a web page. Wow. It is a report of coverage as a web page. Awesome. I don't want this to show up in my Git repository, so I'm going to go back to the main directory here. I'm going to open up this file that's called gitignore. When we created our project with vtest, it created this file along with it. Gitignore is a file that tells Git to ignore certain files. I don't want to version control the coverage reports. These are something that get generated every time I run that test suite, so I don't want to do that. So I'm going to add to this file coverage as a folder. I don't want that to be included in my Git repository. I'll say git add, git status, git add.gitignore. I'm going to commit this. Testing setup is done. I will push this up to the repository after class. What I do want to do now is I want to make a new branch. We're going to start doing some other stuff, and I want to save this branch as it is right now in the state that it's in right now. So what I'm simulating is submitting something for assessment, and I want to save the state that that's in right now. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to say git checkout -b. I want to make a new test, new branch, sorry. I'm going to call this branch vtest is done or set up. In my shell, this shows the name of the branch that we're currently on in the command prompt that I've got. But we can also ask about the branches that we've got by typing in git branch. So this is the branch command. If you're using a visual Git tool or a visual version control tool, you'll see branches listed somewhere. A branch here is really a way for us to kind of separate different paths of development. And so what I'm doing here is saving the state that I'm in right now as a separate branch, so that if I need to come back here, I'm going to be able to make changes to that state that it's in right now. I don't want to do anything with this right now. I just want to save the state that I'm in right now with a name. So I'm going to go back to my main branch. And we're going to keep on doing our development in the main branch. So I'll continue to work on the stuff that we're going to keep on working on today in this main branch. Yeah.
That's what we added to the gitignore, like which file we
The file that we added to git ignore, it was this line here at the bottom. There's that folder that's called coverage that gets created when we ran vtest with coverage. And I just don't want to include that in my output. My rationale for that is that every time you run vtest with coverage, it's going to change those files. And then Git will say, hey, these files have changed. Do you want to add them? And I just don't want that to be there. Yeah. OK. I'm going to pop back over here to my web browser. And what I want to move on to now is let's wrap up some concepts with this idea of MVC to have a little bit more of a functional, minimal implementation of MVC. I want to do a few things with this. First, I want to finish up the to-do that we have from last week. I want to move that button from index.html into the view where it belongs. So in that trainer view class. Then what I want to do is add some functionality to this that kind of completes what we would need to do for a minimal MVC implementation. I want to add a new view that is going to be able to be added and removed from the display. So our controller is going to have some responsibility for deciding when views should show up and when they should be removed from the display. The views themselves will have some part of that. They're going to have to know a little bit about how they work internally so that they can do stuff related to that. But our controller is going to be the one that ultimately decides it's time for you to show up now, so I want to create an instance of you. So we'll do that. I also want to be able to take inputs. So I want to be able to show fields on my page, and I want the fields to be able to have data entered into them so that it can be passed to the controller so the controller can do things like use that input to make new instances of things or modify existing instances of things. Because we're going to start using input here, I also want to be able to handle exceptions. When I pass an invalid value, I still want to be able to raise an exception to say that there's something wrong with this. And I want my view to ultimately show the person sitting in front of the computer, there's something wrong with what you've entered. Here's how you would fix that thing. So here's a message that appropriately says, I'm expecting this. This is what you should be entering here. This is what's wrong. To start, I want to ask you one question about the code that we've got. So I'm going to hold this up for a couple seconds, and then I'm going to switch over to Mentimeter. All right, I'm going to pop over to Mentimeter here. My first question for you has nothing to do with this course, but my first question for you is, where is this giant turbine? This is something that's in Winnipeg. Where is it? It is actually inside city limits. I'll give you 5 more seconds to respond. All right. This is pretty uniformly distributed across the entire city. But there are lots of people. There's a cluster here of 2 and 4, so six, I guess. There's a cluster of about 6 there in actually about the right spot. So this giant turbine here is located not actually too far away from here. It's located right there. And this building behind it, this is the Manitoba Hydroelectrical Museum. This is on Harrow. This is where Harrow kind of joins Pembina Highway, pretty close to that. The Electrical Museum is pretty small, but it's pretty cool. They've got a streetcar in there, like an actual streetcar that would have been on the Winnipeg streets back in the 50s. And what's funny to me, this is I don't think relatable. This might be relatable to you. Were any of you taking Winnipeg Transit before PEGO started? Like paying cash fares? Yeah? Do you remember the fare boxes? That were like, it was a big coin thing and it had glass on the sides. And the driver would have, it would be a little platform, like it would scatter your change around and it would land on this little platform where the driver would be able to like tap this thing to make your change scatter just a little bit more so that the driver could look at it and say, yeah, you've actually paid the correct fare. And then press it even harder and it would just drop into this fare collection box. The streetcar that's in there has one of these fare collection boxes. The fare collection boxes, I think, were made for the streetcars, and they continued to be used in Winnipeg Transit buses until like 2010, at least, I think. So they were in service for like 50 or 60 years of constant service, which is remarkable because Pego is a piece of garbage. Oh gosh, Pego is terrible. Maybe it's gotten better, but I'm pretty sure it's still awful. Anyway, it's fun to check out. It's a fun place to go check out. I liked going there with my kids. I hadn't been there at all when I was a kid. All right, I'm going to pop back to my terminal here very quickly. And I want to open up this file main.ts. Main.ts has this responsibility right now of initializing the controller and connecting that button that shows up on index.html. So my question for you is, I want you to rank the cohesion of this file as it is right now. So keeping in mind, we have these measurements of cohesion being kind of binary high or low, where high cohesion is a positive thing, low cohesion is an indication that we should probably separate some concepts out. I want you to answer that question. Rank this. So high cohesion, low cohesion. We'll hold this up for 5 seconds, and then I'll switch back to the Mentimeter slide. Okay. All right. The average here is kind of stuck in the middle. But as it is, I'd say that the lump that's tending toward low is on the right track here. As it is, main.ts here has two responsibilities. It has create an instance of this controller and let the controller do stuff. But then it also has the responsibility to do something about the view. And those are two very different things. When we think about this MVC architecture, that triangular shape of those three components, the view and the controllers they're not in the same shape. There's no Venn diagram here. We don't want to have overlap between these two different parts. These are fully separate concepts in our system. So for something to be both responsible for initializing controllers and have some responsibility to configure the view, yes, it is about connecting those things together, but to have those different responsibilities is kind of low cohesion. They are related to each other, yes. This is the trainer controller, and we're connecting the button to the trainer controller, but that's really the job of something else. This is really the job of the view itself to do that work. So the first thing that I want to start doing with this MVC wrap-up stuff is I want to start making changes to the existing structure so that we can take this out and put it into the corresponding view. There's two parts to this. The first part is going to be to take this out and move it to the corresponding view. The other thing is going to be to take the button out and move it to the corresponding view. That means that this document, index.html, will consist of a single div that has ID app. That's the only thing that's going to be in here. We're not likely to make changes to this going forward. I'd expect that most of our functionality that's responsible for presenting things, adding elements to this page, are going to be in some kind of a view class. So let's start. I'm going to go back to main.ts here. I'm going to take this entire block that I've got, and I'm going to cut it. And I'm going to open up this file that is trainerview.ts. And I'm going to paste that here. So I want to take that functionality of connecting the controller and the view button together, and I want to move that into the responsibility of the view itself. The view is going to have the responsibility of knowing a little bit about how to do this. We got a big red underline here, and that kind of implies that there's a compile time error. And our compile time error here is that I don't know what this controller thing is. Yeah, fair enough. We don't know what this controller thing is. So we need to change our constructor to accept an instance of this controller so that we can actually do stuff with it. And as part of that, I'm going to add a new property to this class. So I'm going to add a new property here that's called controller. It's going to be of type trainer controller. I'm going to accept in my constructor an instance of controller. And I'm going to change this. These are the same things, but I will say this dot controller dot add to team. And finally, I will add a setter here. Okay. Our view has the responsibility now of connecting the button and the controller. The view has to know about controllers. It has to know about controllers to be able to do this. And so I'm going to open up the controller itself. And I need to pass an instance of a controller to this view so that it has something to work with. And so what I'm going to pass is this. I want this view to know about me because I want it to invoke methods on me when it needs to invoke methods on me. So the two things that we've got here are that in the controller, I'm passing a reference to myself to the view. And in the view, I'm accepting that instance, but I'm also setting up this event listener so that when the click happens, it's going to call that method on that controller.
What type of relationship with that? Is it dependency or?
This relationship is that the view has a dependency on the controller, yes. Yeah, it has a controller, now it has a dependency on that controller. The other thing that I want to do here is that we've got index.html. It has this add Pokemon button that's on it still. But I don't want that here. This is not really the responsibility of this Pokemon, this index.html page. It's really the responsibility of this view to add this thing to the page. And so I'm going to delete this. I'm going to cut it from index.html. I'm going to modify this slightly. I'm going to change these double quotes to backticks. I'm using backticks here because I want to have a multi-line string. And I'm going to paste that button here. So now my controller fully has the responsibility of, I'm going to make this trainer div. The trainer div is going to be where I have information about the trainer and also buttons that can make changes to the trainer, at least in this kind of context here. I've got that button that's been added, and now I, the view, have the responsibility of connecting the controller and that button together, so that when that button gets clicked, the correct method on the controller is invoked. Our index.html here is basically empty now. That's fine. That's kind of where we want to be with this. And our view fully has this responsibility of managing the view for a trainer. I'm going to go back here to main.ts. I'm going to delete these comments. I'm going to delete let equals. We're just going to call the constructor. I don't need to know about this anymore. It just needs to get made. It will kind of hang around because it's attached to the page. I'm going to save this. I'm going to save this. I'm going to save all. I'm going to zoom out here. I'm going to say npx vite. I want to run my server. And I want to confirm that the changes that we've made here have the effect that we're hoping for. Got this button, add Pokemon. I click it, still adding Pokemon. Come to you just 1 second. This is kind of awkward. The button is moving. I'm going to make one last change to this. I'm going to move this button up. There. Now, when I refresh this page or when it's refreshed for me, it will just add them after. So I don't have to follow this button around. Yeah.
Yes, I'm just wondering, here we're passing just one controller for that view, for the button to work with that controller, but what if a particular button, when clicked, will trigger multiple different parts of our system that are the responsibilities of different controllers? How do we pass, if such a case can occur, how do we pass multiple controllers to the same view if we have the controller containing the view, just one controller?
So remember, I guess, that the view itself has a reference to the controller here. So you can have as many controllers in a view as you really want. The views shouldn't know about each other, but they can know about as many controllers as is necessary. If there's 4 buttons on this page and each of those 4 buttons will interact with different controllers, then you would want to have those different controllers being passed to this thing. The other part of this is that if you click this button and it causes other stuff to happen, that's where we start to get into the state of the controller asks for the model to make changes to itself. The model will notify interested things. If a change in the model requires some additional view to show up, then the controller in this case might be one of the listeners that says, when this event happens, I need to pop up this dialog box. And that's kind of the relationship that we'd have there, is that the model itself would be responsible for notifying that thing. The controller wants to know that this has happened. It gets notified. It will change the views that are showing on the screen right now.
Okay. So if we can add multiple controllers to a view class, how do we do it when the view class is initialized within just a single controller? We pass other controllers to that controller's constructor?
The controllers can know about each other, yes. The controllers can know about each other. The views should really be independent of each other. We want to be able to use this to kind of compose views up from the views that we've got. I want to be able to have 5 different views on my page where each of them have different responsibilities. I don't want to have to worry about interdependencies between views. They can all know about other controllers.
Could you repeat this point? Like, you have multiple views for each page?
You can have multiple views for each page, yes. That's our next stop, is I want to add another view here that will show up on the page that we've got.
So, like, shouldn't it be like every single page in our program have one single view?
Okay, so keep in mind that this is a single page application. So we're going to have multiple views that will show up on this single page. When I'm thinking of the word view here, I'm thinking of something that is going to be contained within a page, as opposed to like, I'm clicking this link and it's taking me to a whole different page. Everything is going to be done within the context of this one page. We're never going to leave the root of this web address. It will always be the same thing.
You can't, like, remove what's on the page.
We will be able to add and remove things from the page as interactions start to happen.
But then like in terms of the projects that we're doing, like how would we like have a checkout page and then have a products page?
You won't really have separate pages. You'll have to have different views that represent these
So
things.
like we'll remove everything and then add.
As necessary. You may not need to remove everything. The example I want to show you is a modal or a dialogue, so something that kind of appears on top of other things as opposed to having to remove stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
So you mentioned that when we have a particular view, like a button that is clicked, and then the model is changed because of that, and we will possibly have the controller listening for that change in order to involve other views.
Yes.
Can we do that with the listeners of the other views themselves, in order not to involve the controller?
I don't, I mean, I guess, yeah, but the views can't construct other views. They shouldn't construct other views. The controller should be the one that has the responsibility to do that. Okay. We did that to do, so I will remove the to do from here. Are we all good with this so far? Okay, awesome. All right. Our next step is I want to be able to take input. I click this button, it adds 10 to my page. And internally we know that this means that this is the max HP of the Pokemon that has been added to the team of the trainer that we've got. Minimally, I would like to be able to change the value that's being used to show up here. I want to have Pokemon that have different max HP than 10. I don't want to have this hard-coded anymore. I want to get input to represent that thing. Maximally, we would do things like adding nicknames and stuff, but that's going to be too much for one class. So let's just limit ourselves to, let's change this number that shows up. I want to get a value from the page for a number. My model is already set up. I don't need to make changes to the Pokemon model to do this. We've got that Pokemon model, we've got this trainer model. In terms of the feature that we want to add here, they are complete. So we really don't need to make any changes to those classes. Instead, what I want to do is I want to start adding a new view to this screen. So I'm going to quit this side. I'm going to open up my Explorer again, and I want to make a new file in this view directory. The view that I'm going to add here is called Create Pokemon View. This is going to be a TypeScript file that we're working with. And the responsibility of this is going to be, when I click the Add Pokemon button, I want a dialog to show up. I want something to show up on my screen that will then allow me to enter data and have another button that I can click to provide that data as input. So I'm going to start typing some stuff in here. I want to export default class, create Pokemon view. This is going to be structured quite similarly to the existing trainer view. We need to have a reference to the controller that we're interacting with. And the controller that we're going to interact with here is the trainer view still. Ultimately, this job is I want to pass something to that controller, the trainer controller, so that I can add this Pokemon to the trainer. So my controller instance here is going to be of type trainer controller. My constructor is going to take an instance of that. Whoops. And once I've got that, I'm going to want to start setting up my dialog that's going to show up on my page. I'm going to use a new type of element to represent that. The element that we're going to use is called dialog. Document, remember, is this global scope variable that we have access to in the web browser that represents the thing that's on the page right now. I can call this create element function or method on it, and what that's going to do is it will internally create an object representation of an HTML node, but it's not going to put it on the page anywhere. I'm just making this element so that I can start setting it up. I'm going to create this element that's called dialog, and I want to keep track of that. So I'm going to make a new instance variable here that's called dialog. This is going to be of type HTML dialog element. Within the dialog, I want to set a couple of values. I want to give this an ID. When we were doing this with HTML, we just set a property that was called ID. We can do something similar here in code. I can just say this.dialog.id. So I created that element, and now I can say .id to set that attribute on that thing. And the ID that I want this to have is that it's going to be called add Pokemon dialog. And what I want to do with this is I want to stuff some HTML into this. The HTML that I want to put into this is going to represent the field that I want to type something into. It's going to represent a label for that field, and it's going to represent the button that I will actually click to then add this Pokemon to the team. So I'm going to say input. Input is the type of tag that we will use to have inputs show up on our page. Inputs are discriminated. So the way that we create different kinds of inputs in HTML is to say that this input has a type. There are a bunch of different types of inputs that we can add to a page. Things like checkboxes, radio buttons. Radio buttons are the ones where you can select only one of some of them. Checkbox, it's a checkbox. Text is text input. There are other things like colors and calendars and stuff that you can choose from. We're choosing to set the HP of a Pokemon. And so what we're going to say here is, I want this to be of type number. Number is going to be the input type that shows up where it's got like, the word for this, I believe, is spinner, where it's buttons that are up and down, and it will change the number that's showing up in that input area. I want this to be input type number, and I want it to have an ID of initial HP. And the syntax I'm going to use here is / within the creation of this element. So I want to close this element on itself. In other places, I do tag and then close. In this one, this can be a self-closing element. You can omit that / if you want to. It won't really make a functional difference to the thing that shows up on the page. In front of this, I want to add a label. I want to be able to say, this is what this thing is. Label is a type of element that we can use to attach to an input. The way that we attach it to an input is to say for, and what we put in the for is the ID of the fields that we want this label to be attached to. And what I put in this label is the text that I want to show up beside this element on the page. And finally, what I want to do here is I want to add a button. So just like we've done before, add poke, e accent aigu, add Pokemon. This is now a dialog that has an input field and a button on it. But it actually doesn't show up on our page yet because it hasn't been actually added to our page yet. I've created this element, but it's just kind of floating around there. So I want to add this to the page. I'm going to add this to the page, not by putting it into that app div. I just want this to be on the page. I don't care where it goes. I just want it to be on the page so that it can start to show up. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to say document.body. So this now refers to that tag HTML and then body. We're now referring to the body part of our HTML document. And I want to append child. I want to add this to the end. And I want to add this dialog to the end. This now will attach it to the page. It's going to be attached to the page. Dialogues by themselves don't show up. They don't appear. They're hidden by default because they are a dialog. And so I want this dialog to show itself. So I'm going to say this.dialog.show. This will cause this dialog now to appear. It will not appear if it doesn't get shown. I want to show it. I want it to actually appear on the page. I'm going to save this. We've created this view class, but nobody's creating it yet. So we actually have to have somebody create it. I want to have my controller have the responsibility of making an instance of this view so that it can start to do something. So I'm going to open up now my controller. My trainer controller is going to be the one that's responsible for making this view. It's going to be responsible for making an instance of this view. This is a dialog that I want to show up sometimes, and I want it to go away sometimes. I don't want it to be attached to the page after I've actually clicked the button that's on this dialog. I want it to disappear. I don't want it to be there anymore. So I'm going to add a new property to my controller that represents this create Pokemon view. And I'm going to say here question mark. This now says this can be null. I want you to allow null to be assigned to this. I don't want to initialize this view when the constructor is called in this controller. I want it to stay null until something is actually pressed for that to happen. So question mark here says this can be null. The type that this has is going to be create Pokemon view. And notice that it does not give me error saying this is not initialized in the constructor. Question mark, it's okay. Yes, this is allowed to be null. This is allowed to be uninitialized. Null or undefined. I'm going to allow this to have no value here. I do want to actually have this show up on the page. And so I'm going to add a new method to this class. And the method that I'm going to add here is show create Pokemon view. This takes no arguments. I don't need any arguments right now. I really just want to respond to a button being clicked. When this is clicked or when this method is invoked, I want to make an instance of that. So this dot create Pokemon view. And I want to pass to it this. It needs a controller so that it can do stuff with it. So our controller here has the responsibility of creating the instance of this view. It's making a decision about which view is showing up on the screen right now. I'm going to save this. And what I'm going to open up now is trainer view itself. When this button is clicked, I no longer want to just add this Pokemon blindly to the list. I want the dialog to show up. And so I don't want to say controller.add to team. What I really want to say here is, whoops, show create Pokemon view. I want to show the dialogue. I don't want you to add the Pokemon yet. I just want to see this dialogue showing up on the screen. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to switch back to my web browser now. And the state that we're in is that we've added this button that was added by the trainer view itself. So our controller is constructed. The controller creates this instance of the trainer view. The trainer view adds that button to the screen, and it's hooking up that button to the controller. When I click this, the event that I want to invoke here is I want you to show this new view. I want you to create an instance of this new view on my screen. So if I click on this, I'm going to make this a little bit smaller here. If I click on this, the dialog shows up. I've created this new instance of this view. This doesn't do anything because there is no event on this button right now. If I look at this, it's just a button. I haven't actually added any functionality to this thing. I'm going to go back over to my terminal here. So the state we're in is that we're able to add this view to the screen. The dialog from that view is showing up. This dialog is showing up on the screen. Now I need to add some behavior here. I need to hook this view up with the controller again. What I'm going to do is this. I'm going to write a private function here that's called add Pokemon. This function has the responsibility of getting input has the responsibility of getting input and providing it to the controller class. So this function is going to be the one that actually calls the method on the corresponding controller class. In here, what I want to be able to say is I want to get something that is contained within this dialog. The thing that I want to get that's contained within this dialog, so query selector, is of type input. We've got a few different ways that we've run this query selector. Typically, we're saying number sign. I want to find this element that has a specific ID. I could also do that here, but I'm doing this slightly differently. I'm asking for just the first element that you find that is of type input that is underneath this object. I want to get this thing that is of type input, exclamation point. I promise you that this is not null. And the value that I want to get from this is value. And you can see here that there's a few options as date, as number. This is a number, so I want to get this value as a number. Yeah.
Like, how did we promise that it's not empty? Can't we just force the it's empty?
The exclamation point here doesn't say that the value is empty. It says that the element that we get back from the document is not empty. Yeah. When we click the button and it's empty, value as number is nan. Yeah, this is a bug. This is a bug, an intentional bug, but it's a bug. The value that we get back from an empty field is not a number. Yeah. Nevertheless, I want to get this value as a number. And what I would like to do with this is two things, I guess. I'm going to have vsplit here, and I'm going to open up my controller. I now want add to team to accept an input of type number, and I want to pass that here to the constructor of Pokemon. Then, in my private method, I'm going to say this dot controller dot add to team, and I want to pass that initial HP that I just got from that element. Assuming that this is successful, I would also like to hide this dialog. I don't want it to be on the page anymore. In fact, I'd like it to kind of remove itself from the page. And so at the end, what I'm going to say here is document.body.removeChild, this.dialog. Assuming success, remove the dialog from the page. I want to hide this view. I don't want it to show up anymore. I want it to remove itself from the page. I'm going to save all here. And the very last thing I'm going to do is here. I've got the button that has been added to the inner HTML of this dialog. I want to connect those things together. So I'm going to say here document this.dialog.query selector. The thing I want to get is the button. Exclamation point. I promise that this is not an undefined or null value. And what I want to do with this button is I want to add an event listener or click. And what I would like it to run when this thing is clicked is this dot add Pokemon. So my controller is making this instance of the view when the button is clicked. The view itself is setting up a dialog, adding a button, adding an event to that button, putting the elements, the dialog on the page, and then showing this dialog. When the button is clicked, we're going to get the value that is from the fields that we put on the page. We're going to call this method on the controller to add it to the team, and we're going to remove this element from the page. Assuming success, this should hide now. I'm going to pop back to my web browser here. This should have refreshed itself after making those changes. The state that we are currently in is that we've got this trainer view showing up. The add Pokemon button is there. I click the add Pokemon button. This new view is showing up on the screen that's allowing me to type stuff in. The view, the dialog that we've got here, has been added to the bottom of the body. We've got the button here that says add Pokemon, and we've got this event. This is calling a private method inside of that view class that does the stuff that we're doing with the controller. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller here. I'm going to type in a number here, 12. And if I click this, I am crossing my fingers here. I'm sure it's going to work just fine. When I click this, it shows up. Okay. Oh, good. There's delight on your faces at this working. Yes, there's delight on my face that this is working. I'm going to click this again. Add Pokemon. 78. Add. Awesome. Yes, we're getting Pokemon with different values that are showing up. This is functionally useless. Again, like I can't discriminate between these Pokemon that have different initial HPs. I really do want to put names and stuff on here, but in terms of I've got this view showing up and being removed from the page and getting some inputs, this is great. There's a problem with this, and we have 5 minutes to fix it, so let's fix it. If I click on this button, I get this giant stack trace. Assertion error. Pokemon must have an initial HP that is greater than 0. Yeah, that actually makes sense. Yes, that is the assertion that we put into this. We must have Pokemon that have an HP that's greater than 0. The value that's being returned when I click on this, value as number, from this field, as it is right now, is nan, not a number. If I type in -9, we'll get the same stack that's being printed out here. This is another assertion error. It must be greater than 0. What I would like to do is I'm going to go back to this. I'm going to open up my Pokemon class. This is the one that does that check. We have these assertions. We have class invariants. The goal for our class invariants, just like in Comp 2450, is I should never see those showing up in my console. I never want to see an assertion failure when I'm actually using my software. I do want to see exceptions being raised, but I don't want it to be because of an assertion failure. I'm going to make a custom exception for this class. It's going to be of type invalid HP exception. This extends error, and it's going to have an empty body. I don't even want to put a message in here because I don't want to use that message on the screen. It's the view's responsibility to decide what to print. I don't want my exception to have the responsibility of knowing what message is being printed to the screen. Here, I'm going to say this. If this .hp is less than or equal to 0, throw an invalid HP exception. In Comp 2450, we used the builder pattern for this. For us, for now, I don't actually care to use the builder pattern. If I can discriminate between the different exceptions that are being raised, so have these custom exceptions for these different fields, that's enough for me now to be able to highlight a specific field and say that's the one that caused the problem. The use of the builder pattern was very much, I want to create an instance of this slowly, and I want to validate each part of it as I'm going through it. That was useful in a text-based environment. When I have all the fields on the page, I just want to highlight the one that has the problem, and I can get that information from a constructor that is throwing those exceptions for me. So I'm going to say that. I want to throw this invalid HP exception so I don't get an assertion error. My controller itself, I am not going to do anything with this. I will allow my controller to throw the exception. The constructor is going to throw an exception when I call this new Pokemon constructor. I want add to team to also throw an exception. Just let it raise the exception up. I'm not going to handle it in my controller. The place that I want to handle this is here, in my view itself. I would like to handle, whoops, I'm very sorry. The place that I want to handle this exception is in my view here. So what I'm going to say here is try. I'm going to try, and I'm going to catch something. I want to try this. What I want to try is calling add to team. And assuming success, I'm going to remove this from the document. Whoops. I'm going to catch. In TypeScript and JavaScript, I believe it's also consistent with JavaScript. In TypeScript and JavaScript, we can have one catch. It has to be of type any in TypeScript. If we don't specify any, it's just any by default, but it must be of type any here. And so in my catch statement, I'm going to have a conditional statement. If E instance of invalid HP exception can't have multiple catches to discriminate between different kinds of errors, so I have to interrogate the type of the exception that was raised by asking instance of. There might be fancier ways to do this, but that's don't know, this is good enough for me. If there was a problem, I'm going to say this, this dot dialog dot query selector. What I want to do here is get an instance of, get the input field. And I'm going to say exclamation point. I promise that this is not null. And what I'm going to say here is dot set attribute. The attribute that I want to set is called style, and the value that I want to give this is border color red. I will also change this after class today to put a message here, but for us, for now, it's enough to say this is going to show up as red. I'm going to go up to the top here, and I'm going to add this import invalid HP exception from Pokemon. It's in curly braces because this is not default export. I'm going to pop over here to my web browser one more time. I'm going to click on this. I'm going to type in -9. I'm going to click add Pokemon. Awesome. We've got this red showing up. We're going to put a message here, but red showing up is enough for us to say we've caught this exception, and I'm presenting some error to the person that's sitting in front of my machine. At this point, you should be able to build up a minimal MVC application that does things like getting input, showing different views based upon different conditions, and rendering errors when there's an exception that's being caught. You should also be able to use a testing framework to automate running test suites, and for us, you should be able to run that test suite with coverage now. Thank you all for giving me an extra minute of your time, and I will